The pipe had been leaking for 3 days. Dax's work was flat on his back underneath the water reclamation unit, wrench in hand, boots covered in gray mineral sludge, when the crate landed 3 feet from his head with a sound like a dropped coffin. He did not flinch, he just stopped turning the wrench. 3 pairs of alien feet stood around the crate. He recognized the boots. Therakishu combat soles, wide and flat, belonging to the crew that had made it their personal mission to remind every human on Station Cable 9 that humans were the newest, smallest, and least impressive species in the Galactic Assembly. "Welcome gift," said a voice above him. Low, rumbling, the kind of voice that thought it was funnier than it was. "From all of us, since you love animals so much." There was laughter, then the boots walked away. Dax lay still for a moment. He listened to the retreating footsteps. He listened to the thing inside the crate. It was breathing. Fast, shallow breaths. And under that, a low sound, not a growl, not quite. More like the noise a live wire makes when the insulation is stripped off. A warning that had not decided yet if it was fear or fury. He slid out from under the pipe and sat up. The crate was military-grade containment. Steel-reinforced, ventilated, with a biohazard tag on the side that someone had crossed out and replaced with the word joke in green marker. Through the ventilation slats he could see movement. Something dark. Something that caught the light wrong, like the light did not want to land on it. He had been in the frontier service for 6 years. He had seen a lot of things that could kill a man. He pulled up his data pad and searched the tag number on the crate. The species file loaded slowly. When the image came up, he stared at it for a long time. Valkyr juvenile, estimated age 8 to 12 weeks. The file had a threat classification in red. Below that, a single line of text, no confirmed case of successful captivity. All handling attempts resulted in handler fatality. He set the data pad down. Then he went and got his lunch. He came back with a ration pack, sat down cross-legged on the floor about 2 meters from the crate and opened the pack slowly. He did not look at the crate directly. He looked at the wall past it. He ate without hurry, the way a man eats when he has nowhere else to be. The breathing inside the crate changed. Still fast but different, less wire, more listening. He stayed there for an hour. When he left half the ration pack on the floor near the vent slots. By the next morning, every alien on the station had heard about the crate. Nobody came near that corridor. A Celari medic named Nari had posted a notice on the internal board. VALKOR juvenile ON Deck 4, avoid. Below it, someone had added, human is still alive, also avoid. Dax came back in the morning with water and a second ration pack. He sat in the same spot, same distance, same quiet. The food from the night before was gone. He did not smile about it. He just noted it the way you note that the sun came up expected, but still worth paying attention to. On the 3rd day, he moved 1 meter closer. On the 4th day, he started talking. Nothing important. He talked about the pipe he had fixed. He talked about a dog he had when he was 9 years old, a half-wild thing his mother said they could not keep, that had followed him home anyway and slept across his feet every night for 7 years. He talked about the way rain smelled on Earth, which was a smell no recycled air space station had ever come close to. The Valkyr listened. He could tell it was listening because the sound changed. The wire hum dropped away. What replaced it was quieter, not peaceful, just waiting. On the 6th day, the crate door was unlatched from the inside. Dax did not move. The creature that came out was the size of a large cat, built low to the ground, with 4 legs and 2 folded wings pressed tight against its sides. Its scales were black with the faintest dark green edge, visible only when it moved. Its eyes were amber, old-looking eyes, set in a young face. It looked at him the way things look at you when they are deciding something that cannot be undecided. It walked toward him on feet that made no sound at all. It sniffed his boot. then his knee. Then it walked in a slow circle around him and came back to the front. Then it sat down, curled itself into a tight coil, put its head on his leg and closed its eyes. Dax sat very still. From the doorway of the corridor, 20 meters back and half hidden behind a support column, Nari, the Selari medic, stood with a data recorder raised and her mouth open. She had come to document a fatality. She had her emergency kit and a full incident report preloaded. She watched the most dangerous juvenile predator in 4 star systems fall asleep on a human's leg. She lowered the recorder slowly. Then she sent one message to her research log. It said only, "Something is wrong with these humans, or possibly something is very, very right." Commander Brell's order came through at 600 the next morning. The Valkyr was to be destroyed within 48 hours. Dax read the order. He looked down at the creature sleeping beside his bunk. It had moved there sometime in the night, apparently deciding the floor was acceptable. He typed back one word, "Understood." Then he got up and started preparing his case. Commander Brell did not dislike humans. He simply did not understand them, and things he did not understand made the skin under his collar plates itch. He read the response to his destruction order, one word, "Understood," and felt the itch start. In his experience, understood meant either full compliance or the beginning of a problem. With Tharax soldiers, it meant the first. With humans, he had learned it could mean either, and there was no reliable way to know which until you were already in the middle of it. He pulled up the station's internal sensor feed for Deck 4. The human was sitting at his workbench. The Valkyr was on the floor beside him, watching him write something on a data pad with the focused attention of a creature that had decided this particular human was worth studying. Every few minutes the creature would shift, and the human would reach down without looking and rest his hand briefly on its back. The creature would settle. Brell watched this for 4 minutes. Then he closed the feed and went back to his logistics report. Dax spent the first 12 hours of the 48 building a record. He did not argue, he documented. There was a difference and it mattered. He logged every interaction with the Valkyr since day 1. Timestamps, behavioral notes, feeding observations. He included the fact that the creature had not attempted to harm him at any point. He included the fact that it had chosen to leave the crate on its own rather than being forced out. He included 3 separate entries noting that it had placed itself between him and the door each time someone walked past in the corridor, not attacking, just positioning. He labeled that section, "Protective Behavior Unprompted." He sent the file to Commander Brell at the 18-hour mark with a subject line that said, "Review when time permits. No urgency." Brell opened it immediately. He would not have admitted this to anyone. On the second day, Nari found a reason to be in the corridor near Deck 4 storage. She told herself it was an inventory check. She was not checking inventory. She was watching the human name the creature. She had heard through the station's gossip network, which moved faster than most communications arrays, that the human had started using a word with the Valkyr. A short sound, 2 syllables, Skora. She watched him use it now. He said the word and the creature's head came up, not the snapping alert of a startled predator. The quiet attention of something that had learned that sound meant the human was talking to it specifically. Nari added a note to her file. Valkyr Juvenile demonstrates recognition of individual designation within 14 days of first exposure. Cross-reference. No galactic species has achieved named recognition bonding with Valkyr at any age. Suggest this is unprecedented. She paused. Then she added, "I am beginning to think the joke is on the crew who gave it to him." At hour 36, Dax told Skora about his dog. He had told the story before, in those early days of talking to an empty crate. But he told it again now, sitting on the floor with his back against the bunk, because Skora was curled beside him, and it felt like the right story for the moment. The dog's name had been Rot, short for something his sister had tried to name it that no one could pronounce correctly. Rot had been part shepherd, part something that didn't have a name, and entirely the kind of animal that knew when you were sad before you did. Dax's neighborhood on Earth had not been the kind of place where things lasted, but Rot had lasted. 7 years, right up until the evacuation, when the war zone sirens had gone and Dax had been 17, and there had been no way to bring him. He did not finish the story the same way twice. Some versions ended with the evacuation. This version ended with the fact that he had spent the next 15 years making sure that anything that came into his care had somewhere safe to be. Skora did not understand the words, but she put her head on his knee anyway. At hour 47, Commander Brell walked onto deck for himself. He had his sidearm. He had 2 soldiers behind him. He had read Dax's documentation file twice, and he had not changed his order, because orders were not changed by documentation files. They were changed by command decisions, and he had not made one yet. Dax stood when he heard them coming. He did not move toward them or away. He just stood. Skora came off the floor in one smooth motion and placed herself between Dax and the door. She was still small, the size of a large dog, wings folded, low to the ground. She did not hiss. She did not spread her wings. She simply stood there with those amber eyes fixed on Brell and waited. Brell stopped. In 30 years of military service, he had looked at a lot of things that could kill him. He recognized the look, but this was not the look of a creature about to attack. This was the look of a creature that had already decided it would take whatever came next so that the thing behind it did not have to. He stood very still. After a long moment he looked past her at Dax. "It's protecting you." "Yes, sir." "It chose to do that." "Yes, sir." Brell looked at the creature again. It had not moved. "The order stands," he said, "but the 48 hours is extended indefinitely until it becomes a problem." He turned and walked out. His soldiers followed. Dax waited until the footsteps were gone. Then he reached down and put his hand on Skora's back. She leaned into it slightly, just enough. From the corridor end, through a gap in a storage rack, Nari added one more line to her file. "I no longer think the creature is the remarkable one." 6 months is a long time on a frontier station, long enough for grudges to soften, long enough for strange things to start feeling normal. Skora was not normal, but she was becoming familiar, which was the closest thing to normal that Cable 9 was going to get. She had grown. That was the first thing anyone noticed, and then kept noticing, because she did not stop. By month 2, she was the size of a large wolf. By month 4, her wings were fully extended when she stretched, nearly 3 meters tip to tip, and she had taken to sleeping on top of the supply lockers on deck 4 because the floor had apparently become beneath her. By month 6, her head came to Dax's shoulder when she stood beside him, and the crew had developed a habit of checking both directions before turning any corridor corner because encountering Skora without warning had a way of making even experienced soldiers forget how their legs worked. She was not aggressive. That was what confused everyone. She was simply present, constant, and very, very aware of everything. The first incident happened at the supply depot. A Gorak contractor, heavyset, 3 arms, bad reputation on 3 stations, had been caught by the inventory system stealing fuel cells. When the 2 Tharek guards arrived, he was already gone. Skora was sitting in front of the sealed exit hatch. The contractor was pressed into the corner behind her, as far from her as the room allowed, not moving, barely breathing. She had not touched him. There was not a mark on him. She had simply decided he was not leaving until someone with authority arrived, and she had made this clear in the way that very large predators make things clear, by existing in a specific location with complete certainty. The contractor was escorted out. He left quickly. He did not look back. Commander Brell filed the incident report himself. In the notes section he wrote, Velker Juvenile demonstrated containment behavior without command or handler instruction. Behavior was proportionate and non-lethal. No handler present. He stared at that last line for a while. Then he filed it and went to find something else to think about. The second incident was smaller but spread further. A microfracture in the station's coolant line had been developing for 11 days. The sensors had not flagged it because it was below the detection threshold, a hairline fault in a secondary junction, the kind that would have become a catastrophic gas rupture in another 48 hours. Skora found it at 300. She woke Dax by biting his boot. Not hard, just firmly, the way you pull someone's sleeve when you need them to pay attention. She led him down 2 decks and stood in front of the junction panel looking at it, then at him, then at it again. He opened the panel. He found the fracture with a hand scanner 20 seconds later. Engineering was called. The line was repaired by morning. The engineer who did the repair was a veteran Selari named Orva who had worked pressurized systems for 30 years. She told Nari afterward that the human's creature had done something her sensor array had missed. Nari asked how she felt about that. Orva thought about it. Then she said, grateful mostly, a little embarrassed, mostly grateful. Nari added it to her file. The crew's relationship with Skora evolved the way frontier relationships usually do, not through grand gestures, but through the slow accumulation of small moments that eventually outweigh the fear. There was the Therax soldier named Gret who had been loudest about wanting the creature destroyed in the first month, who now left a piece of his ration on the floor outside his bunk because he had noticed once that she liked the dried protein strips and had apparently decided this was a fact worth acting on. He never spoke about it. He just left the food. There was the young Selari communications tech who had started saying good morning to Skora when she passed her in the corridor, because she had noticed that Skora always turned and watched her go, and it felt rude not to acknowledge that. There was Nari, who had long since stopped pretending she was doing inventory checks and simply came to Deck 4 with her recorder and her questions, sitting at a careful distance and watching with the bright, relentless attention of someone who had found the most interesting thing in their career and was determined not to waste a moment of it. Does she understand language? Nari asked one afternoon. Actual syntax, not just tone. I don't know, Dax said. He was oiling a joint on Skora's left wing where a scale had grown and slightly crooked, something she had started allowing him to do only recently, which he understood was not a small thing. She understands more than I can measure. That is a fascinating non-answer. It's the only honest one. Nari wrote it down anyway. She sent her first formal paper to the Assembly's Xenobiology Board at month 5. 14 pages, dense with observation data, behavioral charts, time-stamped incident logs. The title was Unprompted Social Bonding in Velker Juveniles, a Case Study. The board's response came back in 9 days. Interesting. Please continue monitoring. 6 days after that, a message came from a different office entirely. The Assembly's Species Relations Division. It said, we would like to observe. When is convenient? Dax read the message over Nari's shoulder. Tell them never, he said and walked away. Nari did not tell them never. She told them the situation was developing and she would be in contact. Skora, from her position on top of the supply lockers, watched Nari type the response and made the low wire hum sound she made when she was deciding whether something was a threat. It's fine, Nari told her. Skora did not look entirely convinced. Then the distress signal came in. It hit the communications board at 2140, and the duty officer's voice went flat the way voices go when they are reading something they do not want to be reading. Mining colony Ren 4, 2 sectors out. Under attack. Cause unknown. All personnel sheltering. Requesting immediate assistance. Cable 9 was the only military presence within response range. Commander Brell had the briefing assembled in 12 minutes. Dax arrived with Skora walking beside him, her head level with his shoulder, her amber eyes already scanning the room. Every alien in the briefing sat slightly straighter and slightly further back in their chair. Brell looked at the human, he looked at the creature. He thought about the supply depot, he thought about the gas line, he thought about 30 years of military judgment. "She comes," he said. Nobody argued. Ren 4 was a rock. That was the honest description, a small, airless, mineral-rich rock with a pressurized colony dome sunk into its surface, home to about 200 miners and their families, none of whom had signed up for whatever was currently happening to them. The ship touched down outside the dome's secondary airlock at 3:40. Brell had 12 Theric soldiers. Dax had his sidearm, his kit, and Skora. The raiders were already inside. Reth raiders were not sophisticated. They were fast, vicious, and they operated in large numbers because large numbers had always been enough. They had hit Ren 4 looking for a shipment of processed ore that was worth more than the entire station's annual operating budget. They had not expected military response. They had not expected resistance of any kind. They had certainly not expected what came through the inner corridor at 3:47. The squad took the first corridor without contact. The second corridor was where it went wrong. 3 raiders came around a pressure seal junction, and the firefight started before anyone called it. Brell's front soldiers took cover behind an equipment rack. Dax pulled back around the corner. Skora pressed flat against the wall beside him, all 6 meters of her, wings tight, tail drawn in, moving with a silence that should not have been possible for something her size. More raiders came from the junction to the left, then more from ahead. They were being funneled. Brell's voice came through the comm, tight and controlled. "We are pinned. 4 contact points. I have 2 injured." Dax looked at Skora. She was already looking at him. He had learned over 6 months that there was a specific way she held her head when she was asking a question. Slightly tilted, ears forward, waiting on him the way she had waited on him that very first day, not helpless, not idle, just choosing to wait because he was part of the decision. He held up one hand. Then he pointed left along the wall to where the junction opened up into a wider loading bay, the space she would need to move in. She held still for exactly 1 second. Then she went. The raiders heard her before they saw her. That was the part that Brell would write about later, the part he could not fully explain. They heard the sound, not a roar, not a screech, something lower and older, the kind of sound that reached back into the biology of every living thing and told it to stop, and the firing from the left junction stopped completely for 4 full seconds. Then Skora came through the wall. Not through a door. Through the pressure panel at the junction corner, the thin alloy sheeting that she hit at speed without breaking stride, wings spreading the moment she had space, and the loading bay became something else entirely. She did not kill indiscriminately. That was the thing. That was the thing Brell's soldiers talked about afterward, quietly, in the way soldiers talk about things that do not fit inside the categories they were trained with. She moved through the raiders the way water moves through a broken levee, around the ones who dropped their weapons, past the ones who ran, directly into the ones who tried to shoot her. Her tail cleared a firing line of 4. Her wing, extended, knocked 3 into a pressure wall with controlled, non-lethal force. When one raider aimed at Dax from the junction entrance, she pivoted and put herself in the way before the shot was fired. The round hit her shoulder scale and ricocheted into the floor. She did not look hurt, she looked annoyed. Within 9 minutes, the loading bay was clear. The colonists sheltering in the dome's lower level were reached 4 minutes after that. No fatalities. 11 raiders detained. The rest had retreated to their ship, and they left fast, emergency burn velocity. No negotiations, no demands, simply gone. Brell stood in the loading bay after it was over. His soldiers were securing the detained raiders. Two of his injured were being helped by the colony's medic. Dust was settling from the broken panel in the wall. Dax was sitting on a crate with a colony blanket around his shoulders because someone had pressed it on him, and he had not bothered to take it off. Skora was crouched beside him, and she was doing something new. She was pressing the flat of her jaw against the side of his head lightly, a gesture that had no tactical purpose and no practical function, and was simply, evidently, her version of making sure he was still there. He had a cut on his hand from the panel debris. She had found it without being shown it. She had looked at it for a long moment in the particular focused way she had, and then she had done the jaw press, and she was still doing it now. Brel watched this. Around him, 12 battle-hardened Therax soldiers were also watching this, and no one was saying anything. The colony head came over, a stout woman named Petra who had organized the shelter procedure and kept 200 people alive through 3 hours of siege. She looked at Dax. She looked at Skora. She had the expression of someone who had prepared several things to say and found that none of them were the right ones. She settled on, "Thank you, both of you." Skora turned and looked at her. Direct, amber-eyed, the full attention of something ancient and honest. Petra did not flinch. She held the look. Skora made a short, low sound that no galactic translation tool had a category for, and turned back to Dax. Brel went to his desk in the transport ship. He sat down. He opened the incident report form that he filed after every operation. He sat in front of it for a long time. Then he wrote, "I do not have words sufficient for what I witnessed today. I will say only this. Do not underestimate the human, and do not, under any circumstances, underestimate what walks beside him." He filed it at 600. By 900 it had been flagged by 4 different assembly departments. By noon, it had reached offices that did not usually concern themselves with Frontier Station incident reports. Something had changed. Brel did not know yet how much. He suspected it was a great deal. The first thing the Galactic Assembly sent was a xenobiologist. His name was Dr. Sewell, a Cellari with 17 credentials after his name and the particular energy of someone who had spent 30 years studying things from a safe distance and was now very excited to be less safe. He arrived at Cable 9 with 2 assistants, 4 crates of scanning equipment, and a prepared list of 46 tests he wanted to run on the Valkyr. Skora met him at the docking corridor. She did not attack him. She simply stood at the end of the corridor when the airlock opened and looked at him, and Dr. Sewell stopped walking and did not start again for a very long time. Dax came and stood beside her. "She's not going to hurt you," he said. "I know that intellectually," Sewell said. But she is looking at me like she is reading something that I cannot see." Dax considered this. "Yeah," he said, "she does that." The testing list was a problem. Dax read through it in the briefing room while Sewell explained each item with the enthusiasm of someone presenting a gift. Tissue samples, neural response mapping, isolation trials to measure behavior without the human present, stress tests. Dax handed the list back when Sewell finished. "No," he said. "I understand your hesitation, but the scientific value—" "She is not a lab sample," Dax said. He said it the same way he said everything, quietly, without heat, as if it were simply a fact he was stating rather than an argument he was making. "She chose to be here. That means she has a say in what happens to her. She would not choose that list. You cannot know what she would choose. She cannot communicate consent. She communicates plenty." Dax looked at Skora, who was sitting beside his chair with her eyes on Sewell in the specific way she had, not threatening, just thorough. "You want to study her the way she'll allow. Observation, interaction on her terms. Take your notes, write your paper, but nothing that requires her to be separated from me or treated like a subject." Sewell looked at his list. He looked at Skora. He looked back at Dax. "You are aware," he said slowly, That this bond is the most significant xenobiological event in the Assembly's recorded history. I know what she is, Dax said. Then you must understand why the Assembly needs. I know what she is to me, Dax said. That's the part you're missing. Sewell stayed for 2 weeks, he observed. He took notes. He did not run his 46 tests. He published the most cited paper of his career. The second thing the Assembly sent was General Atha. General Atha was Tharak, senior military command, decorated in 4 campaigns, and accustomed to having conversations that ended the way he decided they would end. He arrived with a formal proposal. The Valkyr would be designated a military asset. Dax would receive a significant rank promotion. They would work directly under Assembly command, deployed where needed. He presented this in Brell's briefing room with the patient certainty of someone, offering something that could not reasonably be refused. Dax listened to the whole presentation, then he said, "No." Atha looked at him for a moment. "I do not think you understand what is being offered. Promotion, deployment, and you control where we go and what we do. In exchange for which? She's not a weapon," Dax said. "She's not a program you can copy. You can't take what we have, put a rank on it, and use it on your terms. It doesn't work that way. She chose this. She chose me. You can't replicate that from the outside, and you can't own it from the top. Every military asset." "She is not an asset." Dax's voice stayed level. "She is a being who made a decision. I will not undo that by handing her to a command structure." The room was very quiet. Skora was behind Dax, standing, not sitting. She had not moved since Atha began speaking. She watched the general the way a mountain watches weather, not hostile, simply utterly, permanently present. Atha looked at her for a long moment. Whatever he saw in those amber eyes, it recalibrated something in his expression. Not defeat, more like the particular recalibration of a man who had been very confident and was now less certain. "This will go to formal review," he said. "I know," Dax said. The formal review convened 22 days later at Assembly Central Station. It was the first time in 400 years that the Valkyr Council had communicated with any non-Valkyr species, and it was the first time in all of recorded history that they had spoken in defense of a bonded pair that included a non-Valkyr. Their statement was 6 lines. The important line was the 4th one. The bond is sovereign. It cannot be owned, directed, or dissolved by external authority. To attempt this is to void the bond entirely. The Assembly's legal division spent 9 days arguing about what that meant. The conclusion they reached was not the conclusion they wanted. Skora and Dax existed outside standard military jurisdiction. The bond was, under Valkyr law, which the Assembly had ratified in treaty 4 centuries ago without fully reading, a recognized sovereign state of 2. General Atha filed a formal objection. He did not pursue it further. Nari, watching from the observation gallery above the Assembly floor, added the final line to her published paper that night. It read, "The most interesting discovery in this study is not the Valkyr's capacity for bonding. It is the human's refusal to allow that bond to be diminished by anything, rank, authority, or the weight of the known galaxy telling him otherwise. This quality in humans may warrant its own field of study." She submitted the paper at midnight. By morning, it had been downloaded 40,000 times. By the following week, it was required reading at the Academy. Back on Cable 9, Dax read the final legal ruling, set it down on his bunk, and looked at Skora. She was watching him with the patient, certain attention she always had, the look that said she had already decided this was fine and was waiting for him to catch up. He reached over and put his hand on her jaw. She leaned into it just enough. "Sovereign state of 2, he said. She made the sound that was not quite a purr and not quite a growl, but somewhere in between, the sound she made when something was settled. He went asleep. She curled around his bunk and watched the door. The galaxy outside had plenty of opinions. She did not care about any of them. 1 year after a crate landed 3 feet from Dax Rourke's head in a maintenance corridor, the frontier routes at the edge of assembly space were quieter than they had been in 11 years. Not because the dangerous things had gone away. The dangerous things were still there: border disputes, raider activity, contested resource lanes, the slow friction of species who did not agree on where their territory ended and someone else's began. None of that had changed. What had changed was that certain routes now had a patrol. 2 figures usually. A human on a small, long-range scout ship, unremarkable in every way. And on the hull of that ship, curled around the dorsal frame with her wings folded and her eyes open, a Valkyr the size of a small transport vehicle who had apparently decided that space was an acceptable place to rest as long as the ship beneath her belonged to the right person. 3 border disputes had been resolved without a single shot fired. In each case, the account was roughly the same. The opposing parties had been approaching confrontation, and then the patrol had arrived, and then the Valkyr had lifted from the hull and stretched, and then everyone had found it very easy to agree to negotiations. Nobody put that in the official reports, but everyone knew. Nari came back to Cable 9 for a conference on cross-species communication theory. She had 3 published papers now, a junior faculty position at the academy, and a habit of being the most interesting person in any room she entered, which she attributed entirely to the 18 months she had spent watching Dax and Skora from behind supply racks. She found Dax in the same maintenance corridor where the crate had landed. He was fixing a coolant fitting. The work never changed. "The assembly wants to know," she said, sitting on a nearby crate, "whether you would consider an ambassador role." "No. I told them you'd say that." She pulled out her recorder out of habit, old habit by now. "They're confused by you, you know. You've turned down 3 rank promotions, 1 research fellowship, a formal commendation ceremony, and now an ambassadorship." "I'm good here." "You're a legend," she said. "I mean that in the literal sense. The Valkyr Council has added you to their oral record. The Gorak traders in the Outer Belt have a name for you in their trading language. It translates roughly as the man the dragon chose. The Celari Academy uses your bond as the foundational case study in the advanced xenobiology curriculum." Dax turned the fitting one more time and sat up. He had a smear of coolant on his jaw and the expression of a man who was not sure what to do with any of that information. "I just sat down next to a crate," he said. "You sat down next to the most dangerous hatchling in galactic record, in a corridor alone, with no protection, and waited." She was scared. Nari looked at him for a long moment. This was the thing she had written in her final paper that no galactic species had been able to fully model. The human had looked at a creature that every threat assessment rated as lethal and had seen something else first. Not threat, not asset, not specimen. Fear. He had seen a frightened creature and responded to that before he responded to anything else. "I have a question," she said. "For the record, a genuine one." "All right." "When you sat down next to that crate, you had read the threat file. You knew what she was. Were you afraid?" Dax thought about this. He did not rush it. "Yeah," he said, "a little." "But you stayed." "She was more scared than I was." Nari wrote it down. She had written a lot of things in her time here. This felt like it belonged at the beginning of something, though she was not sure what yet. The new intake of Frontier Station recruits arrived at Cable 9 late in the afternoon. 12 soldiers, fresh from training, a mix of Tharak, Celari, and 2 humans. Young faces, careful eyes. A young Tharak soldier named Voss found Commander Brel in the operations bay, and came to attention with the nerves of someone who had been saving a question for a long time. "Sir," Voss said, "the stories about the human and the Valkyr, are they true?" Brel had been asked this question before. He was going to be asked it many more times. He walked to the bay window. Below on the landing pad, Dax was sitting on a supply crate with a ration pack, watching nothing in particular. Skora was beside him, not curled, not resting, just present, her great head at the level of his shoulder, her wings settled, the late station light catching the dark green edge of her scales. She was the size of a small ship. She was watching the horizon the way she always watched it, like she owned the space between here and there, and had decided to share it with him. Dax finished his ration. He said something. She turned and looked at him and made the low, settled sound. He put his hand on her jaw. She closed her eyes. Brel watched this. He had watched it 100 times. It still did something to him that he did not have a good word for in any language he spoke. Every word, he said to Voss, and worse. Before Voss could ask what worse meant, the distress beacon lit up. Far out edge of known space, unknown source. Dax looked up from the landing pad. He had eyes that could read a signal light from 200 meters, another strange human thing. He looked at the bay window. Brel nodded once. Dax stood up. He tucked the empty ration wrapper into his pocket because he was, regardless of everything, a man who did not litter. He looked at Skora. She was already standing, already facing the direction of the beacon, head up, wings loosening from their fold, the deep amber of her eyes reflecting nothing except what was ahead. No ceremony, no speech, no moment of decision, because the decision had been made a year ago on a floor next to a crate by two beings who had looked at each other and chosen. The ship powered up. Skora took the hull. They moved. The galaxy had given him the creature as a joke. The joke had grown wings. And the galaxy had never, not once, been the same since.